Have you ever wondered how a huge industry like oil and gas services actually keeps track of its environmental footprint? I mean, how do they measure it all? Well, today, we're diving into the SASB standard. It's a framework that's all about turning ecological impact into real data that investors and, the rest of us can actually understand and use. So let's start with a big question. How do you even begin to measure a company's impact on the planet? It sounds simple, but it's really not. If you're an investor, how are you supposed to compare two different companies on their environmental performance, not just their quarterly profits? How do you take something as complex as ecological impact and turn it into cold, hard data? Well, it turns out the answer is something we use all the time: standardization. And that's where the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, or SASB, comes into the picture. They're basically creating the official rulebook for how companies report on all this stuff. Now, SASB is part of the IFRS Foundation, which is the group that sets global accounting standards. And this is a huge deal. Why? Because it puts sustainability reporting on the same level of seriousness as financial reporting. The whole goal here is to create a common language, so everyone is talking about environmental and social performance in the exact same way. Honestly, the best way to think about it is like a nutritional label, but for a company. SASB has created 77 of these standards, each one tailored to a specific industry. So, just like you can compare the calories on two different boxes of cereal, these standards let investors compare companies on the sustainability issues that actually impact their bottom line. And each standard is built on a really clear four-part foundation. First, it just describes the industry. Then, it points out the most important topics to disclose. And from there, it gets into the real nitty-gritty, the specific metrics they have to measure, and the technical rules to make sure everyone is measuring the exact same thing. The end goal? You guessed it, consistent, comparable data. Okay, so now that we've got the what, let's focus on the who. Today, we're zooming right in on the oil and gas services industry. These are the companies out there on the front lines, drilling the wells, building the equipment, and pretty much supporting the whole exploration and production process. And what's really fascinating is just how much these companies have to report on. It covers everything from emissions to worker safety, but for this explainer, we're going to zero in on that one right there: Ecological Impact Management. This is where we can see a company's direct physical footprint on the land. So let's go deeper. What does managing ecological impact actually mean for these companies on a day-to-day basis? The standard itself really doesn't pull any punches. It says, flat out, that these activities can have significant impacts on biodiversity and ecosystems. So this isn't some fluffy PR issue. It's a core operational challenge for the entire industry. So how do they deal with it? Well, the standard basically points to two different paths. In the short term, it's all about being more efficient, using things like multi-well pads to reduce the amount of land you disturb. But in the long term, it's all about innovation, designing better rigs and using smarter tech to shrink that footprint from the very beginning. But a strategy is just a plan, right? To make it real, you have to measure it. We've all heard the saying, you can't manage what you don't measure. And this is where the standard gets incredibly specific. The key metric, and it even has its own unique tracking code, is the average disturbed land area, and it's measured in hectares. It's precise, it's quantitative, and it's designed for one reason, so it can be compared across the entire industry. But that brings up a really important question, right? What exactly counts as disturbed land? If you want the numbers to be meaningful, everyone has to be playing by the same rules. And the definition is incredibly thorough. Disturbed land isn't just the spot where they drill. No, it's everything. The access roads they build, the pipelines they lay, the places they store equipment, even the waste management facilities. It is the entire operational footprint. Okay, so we've got a clear metric, a detailed definition, but so what? Why does this level of detail actually matter in the real world? Because this isn't just about being green. For these companies, and definitely for their investors, this is all about business strategy. It's about managing risk and, frankly, gaining a competitive advantage. Think about it. A company that's really good at minimizing its ecological impact is a less risky partner for its clients. They're more likely to get permits faster, they can operate in more sensitive areas, and they build a much stronger reputation with everyone from regulators to local communities. It really is a win-win. And this, right here, is the real power of the SASB standard. When every single company is using the same rule book to measure disturbed land, you finally get a true apples-to-apples comparison. An investor can now look at two different companies and see, with actual data, who is doing a better job of managing their impact. So, we'll leave you with this thought. There's an old saying in business, what gets measured gets managed. So the real question is, when we're talking about something as complex and vital as our planet's ecosystems, if we can't measure our impact clearly and consistently, can we truly manage it at all?